Should we think about behavioral economics versus the measurement of emotion versus system one?
I'm just going to say, like, if we were talking to our grandparents, we probably wouldn't use big terms like that, right? We'd probably say something like, well, system one and system two is how our brain works, and behavioral economics is the science of studying how we make decisions with our brain, and measurement of emotion is one way we might do that. So I think you're right that we get all entangled in like the details of all these things, but really it all just has to do with the brain and how we make decisions.
Isn't that such an important tension? So we just heard Elina say it's really complex, and yet we heard from Michelle that we need to simplify this in ways that everybody can understand. That's really the key, I think, to getting this applied more broadly. Have you had any successes or failures in that?
Well, yeah, I was going to say the exact same thing, that we, being human, I think that we prefer simple frameworks and ideas, and I think that's good for our industry, frankly, because it gets us as an industry to move forward. Unfortunately, to your point, is when that does happen, that you have lots of things that get confused, and simplicity can get us into a lot of trouble. So then what you do is you bring in a lot of different complex frameworks to prove out that these 5 ideas are separate and distinct for this reason, and then you create confusion in the marketplace, and therefore, I can make the analogy of some of the things that happened in neuroscience back 10 years ago, where you had similar ideas where very complex science was simplified to a point where it said a lot of things that weren't necessarily true, that it could do certain things that it couldn't do, and it hurt the industry for a decade. And we risk that when we simplify so much, and then you take chances on companies that have got simplified makes sense to you, you take chances, those chances fail, and the senior executives think, behavioral thing, that's just another fad.
Scott, inside of Merck, do people think behavioral economics, system one, emotion, all that's the same?
So, I'm going to talk about how everyone else is talking about this, which is the way I talk about behavioral economics. And the phrase I typically tell people is it's the intersection of the path of least resistance and common sense. That in itself sounds rather simple. The challenge there is that we all have our own perception of what common sense is, and we all have our own perception of what is our path of least resistance. And so that's where the challenge comes in getting it right for each person, is that we all think and behave very differently. And I think that really brings it to life of what we're trying to do here. We're trying to help people make the right decisions in these areas.
Let me build on that one too. Maybe the question of separating these things, what I like about the other side of that question is what brings them together. What brings those together is all of those sciences inevitably are about, to me, driving top-line growth. Because by definition, some sort of growth has to come from a behavioral change. So if these sciences are used to understand and drive behavioral change, they're useful for top-line growth. And so I think of it as it's more important to figure out, in a way, the similarities and how they come together to drive that top-line growth, so that you guys out there can get credit for driving top-line growth versus just insights. Yeah.
That's great. So let's move then into the next question, which is, all right, what are the biggest challenges of getting behavioral science more broadly adopted in this industry and within our organizations? What do you see as the biggest challenges? And of course, what are the keys to overcoming them?
I'll start. One of the biggest challenges we're working on, a number of people have been asked this question, is how can we use behavioral sciences to optimize our forecasts? Now that in itself is a simple question, but every person that I work with wants me to do it the old way and the new way to prove that it works. And so to me, that's the challenge of anything with behavioral economics, because it's new, because people don't necessarily get it, because a lot of the work starts with understanding how people behave and what they're doing. People get a little nervous with the approach, so it's almost like you have to do the old way and the new way in small pilots and start proving it out. And that's really our goal there, but that also there is the challenge, because you don't always have the luxury of time to do that way.
Yeah, with the budget. And that's a really interesting question. So if you're doing it the old way and the new way, what's the evidence that the new way works if it matches the old way? So why do the new way?
Well, like some forecasting, it depends. It's not that the old way works, it's the new way might be better. Might be faster, might be cheaper, might be richer insights. And that's really, the mantra I think across our industry these days is faster, cheaper, better. You can't always have all three. It seems one of them is going to be given, but this is a great place where you can really learn better ways to communicate people and drive up.
Yeah, that's great. Faster, better, and faster, cheaper, and better is definitely the push. In terms of using behavioral science, behavioral economics for forecasting, are you running any models internally that say, hey, this method actually did do a better job forecasting sales or other behavior in the market?
So we're doing two things. One, we're trying to do some historical research and look at past work we've done and see if we can recreate forecasts using behavioral economics to validate the differences. And then we're also looking at existing products, and we're going to do some small pilots of both, where we develop two forecasts and we see which one plays out better. And ultimately, that would be the telltale what works.
That's great. The rest of the panel, what do you think about the biggest challenges?
I think what we've observed with a couple of our clients is that they have internally this resistance from internal stakeholders that they might be really savvy and enlightened and quite passionate about using behavioral science, but then they might have internal stakeholders who, quite frankly, don't necessarily care about the methodology. They just want the same numbers as they've always had, and there's not necessarily an appreciation for doing things a new way. So I think that will just improve over time, but everyone who comes to conferences tends to be, a lot of people who come to conferences tend to be quite up to speed and quite keen to do new progressive things, but then internally I've just observed some frustrations from them that they're really excited, but then facing some hurdles internally.
Michelle?
I think there's probably two issues we face. One is a lot of times behavioral science techniques today give you the what but not the why. And old ways of over questioning, you can ask them why and get an answer, and that makes people feel comfortable that they have an answer. So for example, the neuroscience work, it gives you really deep what and a very clear answer, but then we can't ask the consumer, well, why is that your brain works that way? So I think some of our marketers struggle with that. And then the other thing that can get us caught up a little bit when we do test and learn with different companies is if you think about behavioral science is all about context, you can't control the context. Right? So then you can get in this loop of well, if I can't control the context, then everything is crap and nothing is really true. So I think we sometimes get caught in this loop of well, how do we ever drive an experiment if context is so important?
That's really important, and yet that context influences all research that's done, period, right? So you'd have to ask the same questions about any of your traditional research.
Yeah.
And the challenge of overcoming the why from neuroscience techniques, particularly in ad testing or in that realm, I see that as if we are going to then simply rely on what people say as to why they behaved the way that they behaved or reacted the way they reacted, why are we doing the neuroscience to begin with if we're just going to rely on what they say to give us the insight? That seems like a big challenge. How are you overcoming that, and specifically with neuroscience testing?
Agree. I think we have large adoption of the philosophy of behavioral science, so people buy into the results and we make actions and decisions based off of that, but I still feel like there's this longing for the good old days where I had a focus group and a consumer just told me something that I could go around saying was true. So I don't have an answer. If anyone in the room has an answer for me, I would be happy to take that, but it's just a challenge we face as we push forward that there's this yes and but, what about, why?
So that's a need that we've just uncovered. Thank you. Turn on the clock. That really is very helpful. All right, next question. Where are the two movements in the insights industry that I see, automation and the rise of behavioral science? Where do those two movements intersect? Is it possible to automate behavioral science? And what is the promise and what are the potential perils?
Is it possible? That's interesting. I hope it is. So I have this idea that AI and automation can help with the design of marketing in a very real-time fashion. So the idea is this, that if we make decisions with particular mind states, I know how to activate particular mind states, I would love to be able to see automation and artificial intelligence be able to take a repository of visual and copy from, let's say if I want to activate on the cautious achiever mind state, whatever it is, out of those 18. If I can do that, I would love to see AI take the role of the creative director, first stab at creative, take visuals and copy, put those into a particular platform, whether it's an email, into a direct mail piece, and then give us within, I know that I need to go out with a communication piece for this mind state. I want to have something generated, at least conceptually for me, within 2 minutes and have it done like that. I think think there's incredible power in that. And having really strong creative directors come in, copywriters, massaging between so we can get creative output in a half hour. That's psychologically optimized. I think that's where my company's kind of going in that direction, trying to use these types of sciences in the creation of executions.
That's really interesting. Other ways that behavioral science is being automated, or you foresee it being able to be automated?
I'm not going to say I foresee it being able to be automated, but I'm sure it can be. But when I was reading this question, my initial thought was, well, this goes to a lot of predictive marketing and models that learn from building, and behavioral sciences is all about observing what people do and learning why they do it. And most of the data sets that are looking at this predictive modeling and machine learning, building these algorithms to develop stimuli and send the right messages to the right people based on what they're doing. To me, that's all kind of behavioral economics based on data. So to me, the question becomes, how can we start to leverage that data that exists in ways that we're using behavioral economics to take it to the next level, to take it to the smarter human emotional level that the machine learning and the languages can't take us.
Well, just to build on that, I think you're absolutely right in going in the direction of predictive modelling and using machine learning that way. But as powerful as that is, it's only as good as the people who are designing the models. And we can go looking around much more cheaply and effectively. We can go and looking around with a needle in a haystack. But what behavioural science can give us is those models and frameworks and hypotheses, and then do that search much more effectively. But I think that's where behavioural science can come in and really sort of combine well with automation.
That's great. So moving into the close here, what advancements do you see in behavioral science in the next 2 years? What excites you the most? What's next for the application of behavioral science within insights?
I'm not sure about the application, but the first thing that came to mind when I saw your question was that what really excites me from the scientific side is that a lot of the findings that we all sort of take for granted or have been seen as established things, new research that is coming out that is testing these different findings, or sort of stress testing them among people from different social classes, for example, or from different cultural contexts, from different countries. And what that research is uncovering is that actually is uncovering a lot of the nuance that we're currently lacking, because basically 96% of behavioral science research is done on 12% of the world's population. Namely, a college student in America has 3 times the chance of, being a subject in a psychology experiment. So what we're going to start seeing is, slightly bigger window to human behaviour globally, and I think that's really exciting. Some things are going to not replicate, not work as well. Some things, we might actually be closer to seeing what are more universal. So I think that's where it's almost like if behavioural science is the last mile, then understanding the cultural context and the social class and little things like that is like the final couple of meters in effectively applying behavioral science in marketing.
That's great. Michelle, inside of Mars, what's the most exciting thing you think you're going to be doing in the next 2 years with behavioral science?
I'm just going to go further out than 2 years.
Yeah,
okay.
please.
Imagine a world. No, I get excited about it. If you just think, even just in the last 10 years, how much technology has improved to allow us to do things with the brain, or think of like Google Glasses that allows you to observe what's going on in stores. I really do think we're going to get to a place where we're just passively observing, and maybe you don't even have to conduct research anymore, but you're just accessing this information, understanding and translating the behavior for your own business reasons, and helping to nudge consumers along through that. So I get excited about this idea that the industry is going to transform from doing research to leveraging insights, connecting the dots, and driving growth through that ability to have like strategy, connect the dots, interpretation of the passive observations.
That's great. So last question, what are good resources for people who want to dive deeper in behavioral science? And we can open up for questions. What should people read? Where should they go?
The first one I would tell you is this conference also has, if you don't know, IIeX has the behavioral economics, or they name it something different every time, but the behavioral science conference, usually in Chicago in November. But if you guys are interested in behavioral science, which I think you probably are since you're in this place, it's a whole day and a half, sometimes 2 days of just this science. So So if nothing else, go to that conference and you'll come up to speed really, really quickly on what's newest and advanced in science.
That's great. I'm sure Lenny appreciates that too.
Well, I definitely agree with Will that that's a great conference to attend and kind of really see more focused presentations. I think there are, apart from really delving into like the journals and all of that detailed academic stuff, there are a couple of blogs, for example, that are really interesting to follow, like Behavioral Scientist. You can sign up to a newsletter and they've got some really cool and interesting stuff every month. And then you can follow different academic societies on Twitter, different publications, and you'll see new stuff coming out all the time.